I'm Lena, and I live in New Orleans, surrounded by the kind of humid, heavy air that feels like it's holding secrets. My world? It's mostly paint-splattered canvases and the quiet hum of the window unit in my small studio, tucked away above a coffee shop in the Garden District. It's a far cry from the life my family always seemed to think I should want, or rather, the life they wanted for themselves through me. For years, I poured my soul into my art, into keeping the peace, into being the quiet one, the dependable one. While I mixed colors that captured the bruised purple of a twilight sky over the quarter or the vibrant chaos of Mardi Gras, I was also mixing up excuses for my family, painting over the cracks they left behind with layers of my own resilience and self-denial. My art was my sanctuary, a place where I wasn't just the quiet one, or the sensible sister, or the daughter who didn't cause trouble. In my studio, I was just Lena, creator of worlds, interpreter of light and shadow, but that peace rarely extended beyond my four walls. My family, they were experts at reaching in, their voices like intrusive brushstrokes on a finished piece, always ready with a critique, a demand, or worst of all, a comparison. Especially my mother and my sister, Chloe. They moved through life like they were entitled to the prime spots, the brightest colors, while I was meant for the background, the filler. It's funny, isn't it? The people who are supposed to be your safe harbor are sometimes the ones who inflict the deepest wounds. My story isn't unique, not really. It's about the slow, insidious creep of expectation, the way love can sometimes feel more like a transaction, and how the quiet ones, the ones who try the hardest to please, often pay the highest price. For a long time, I paid that price willingly, believing that my sacrifice was necessary, that their happiness was more important than my own. I believed their version of reality, the one where I was just a supporting character in the grand play of their lives. They had this way of delivering casual cruelty, little jabs wrapped in concern or thinly veiled disappointment. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, each one small on its own, but cumulatively, they bled you dry. While I was busy trying to build a life for myself, trying to find my own voice through my art, they were busy ensuring I stayed within the lines they drew. And then there was the money. Always the money. Or rather, my money, and how easily it seemed to become their money, especially when Chloe needed something. It felt like a cycle I was trapped in, a painting I kept trying to finish but someone kept adding discordant colors to. You spend years like that, bending and contorting yourself, trying to fit into a shape that was never meant for you, hoping that one day, maybe one day, they'll finally see you. See the effort, see the heart, see the person you are, not just the role you play for them. But sometimes, that day never comes. Sometimes, you have to decide to see yourself. And that's where my story really begins. Not with their jabs, but with the moment I finally stopped absorbing them and started deflecting. It's a story about betrayal, yes, the kind that cuts deep because it comes from within your own circle. But it's also a story about finding your own strength, your own value, and walking away from the canvas they tried to trap you on. Let me tell you how their jaws dropped when they finally saw the masterpiece I was painting all along, the one that didn't include them. For as long as I could remember, my life felt like it was being lived under a microscope, but the focus was always slightly off. It was aimed at my sister, Chloe, the golden child, the one who sparkled without even trying, while I was the muted background, the one who had to work twice as hard for half the acknowledgement. Our mother, Eleanor, cultivated this dynamic with the careful precision of a master gardener, nurturing Chloe's perceived brilliance while pruning away anything that made me stand out too much. I wasn't just the quieter child, I was the responsible one. The one who made good grades without needing tutors, who managed her money, the little I had from waitressing through art school, without needing bailouts, who handled her problems with quiet determination. Chloe was the opposite, vibrant, charming, perpetually in some kind of crisis that required immediate, dramatic intervention, usually involving finances or rescuing her from a poor decision. And Mother was always there, checkbook ready, soothing Chloe's ruffled feathers while sighing dramatically about the burden. My art was always dismissed as a nice hobby, something cute little Lena did. In high school, while Chloe was getting accolades for leading the cheer squad, a position mother had campaigned tirelessly for her to get, I won a regional art competition. The prize was small, but the recognition felt huge. I rushed home, buzzing, the ribbon clutched in my hand. Look, Mom, I won. I remembered holding it out, my voice trembling slightly with excitement. Mother was on the phone, presumably dealing with some minor drama of Chloe's. She held up a hand, her expression tight. Yes, dear, lovely. Put it on the fridge. Chloe needs me right now, something about her car. The ribbon ended up tucked away in my desk drawer, forgotten. That was my first lesson. My quiet achievements would always be secondary to Chloe's loud needs. After art school, which I paid for mostly with scholarships and loans and working 3 jobs, I moved back to New Orleans, renting the small studio apartment above the coffee shop. It was tiny, hot, and smelled faintly of stale coffee and turpentine, but it was mine, my haven. I painted constantly, pouring my observations of the city's unique light and character onto canvas. I sold a few pieces here and there through local galleries, enough to scrape by, pay my rent, and buy materials. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a living built on my own terms. But even in my little haven, the family reached in. Mother called daily, sometimes multiple times. Not to ask about my art, never about my art, unless it was to suggest I paint something marketable, like kittens or generic landscapes. Her calls were usually about Chloe. Chloe's rent is due and she's short again. She'd sigh, her voice dripping with weary martyrdom. Could you tide her over, just until her next paycheck? Chloe worked sporadically, jumping from one trendy, low-paying job to another, none of which ever seemed to cover her expenses. I always said yes. At first, it was just a few $100s here and there. Then, it became a regular occurrence. Chloe would promise to pay me back, but the money never materialized. If I gently reminded her, she'd become defensive, accusatory. Oh my God, Lena. Are you seriously hassling me for $50? I thought you loved me. It's not like you need it, you just sit around painting all day. My heart would sink. It wasn't $50. It was the accumulation of hundreds, then thousands of dollars I desperately needed for rent, supplies, or simply to eat something other than instant noodles. But her words, "It's not like you need it," echoed my family's general dismissal of my work, my life, my very existence as less important, less valid than Chloe's. So, I'd back down, mumbling that it was fine, just forget about it. Mother facilitated this. She'd frame it as helping your sister, a moral obligation I apparently had as the more stable one. Chloe is so sensitive, Lena, she'd say, her tone a warning. You know how easily she gets overwhelmed. You're stronger. You can handle this. And I believed her. I believed I was stronger, which meant I was supposed to carry the load. I believed that my quiet sacrifices were a form of love, a way to earn my place in the family unit. The financial strain was immense. There were weeks I genuinely worried about making rent. I'd sell a painting for a decent amount, feel a fleeting sense of accomplishment and security, and then Mother would call. Chloe's car broke down. She needs $1,000 for repairs immediately or she can't get to work, or her boyfriend broke up with her. And she needs to fly to Miami to clear her head, or she just had to have that dress for a party. The reasons varied, but the outcome was the same. My hard-earned money flowed into Chloe's perpetually leaky budget. It wasn't just the money. It was the emotional labor. Chloe would call, hysterical, at all hours, recounting some drama. I'd listen patiently, offering quiet comfort and practical advice. Advice she never took. Mother would call, complaining about Chloe, then complaining about her own problems, using me as her emotional punching bag, her confidant for things no daughter should have to hear. I was the unpaid therapist, the emergency contact, the designated listener for two people who rarely extended the same courtesy to me. If I tried to talk about my struggles, my worries about my art, my life, I'd get a perfunctory, "Oh, that's nice, dear," before the conversation swung back to Chloe's latest escapade or mother's latest grievance. Birthdays were a particular kind of torture. Chloe would receive lavish gifts, trips, expensive jewelry, designer clothes. My gifts were always practical, often things I actually needed but felt like an afterthought. A new set of brushes, the cheap kind, a gift certificate to a chain store, sometimes just a card with a modest check. One year, for my 30th, Mother bought Chloe a down payment on a new car, saying it was a family gift and that I didn't need a car as much as Chloe because I worked from home. My gift was a set of bath towels. Nice towels, but towels. The disparity stung, a physical ache in my chest, reinforcing my status as the less favored child, the less deserving one. The summer I turned 35, things reached a quiet boiling point, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. It was less a dramatic explosion and more a slow, insidious suffocation. I had been working for months on a series of large canvases, abstract pieces inspired by the hidden courtyards of New Orleans, trying to capture the feeling of light filtering through wrought iron and the scent of jasmine. I felt I was finally finding my voice, pushing beyond representation into something deeper, more resonant. I was invited to show one of the pieces in a small but reputable gallery show focused on emerging local artists. It was a significant opportunity for me. I had sunk almost all of my savings into materials for the series, trusting that this show could lead to more. Around the same time, Chloe decided she wanted to open a boutique. This was her latest fleeting passion, announced with great fanfare. She had no business plan, no savings, and frankly, no discernible business sense. But Mother, ever enabling, decided this was the venture they would support. Mother called me, her voice already set in that tone of inevitable expectation. "Lena, darling, Chloe has this wonderful idea for a boutique. It's going to be marvelous. She just needs a little capital to get started. The space she found is perfect, but the first 3 months' rent is substantial." I was quiet for a moment, clutching the phone. I had just sold a small piece, and the money was earmarked for framing the piece for the gallery show, and maybe, just maybe, replacing my ancient mattress. "Mom," I started slowly, I really don't have anything right now. I just spent everything on supplies for this show, and I need to pay for framing." "Oh, Lena, don't be difficult," she cut in, her voice sharp. "It's Chloe. She needs this. This could be her future. Your painting, well, it's lovely, dear, but you know it's not exactly a stable income. This boutique, though, this is real business. Family helps family." "But Mom, the gallery show is my future," I said, my voice rising slightly, a rare flicker of assertion. "This is important. This piece is important." "More important than helping your sister? Than helping family?" Her tone was laced with disappointment, a potent weapon she wielded with mastery. "I thought you loved Chloe. She's your sister, Lena. You know how easily she gets discouraged. If she can't get this boutique off the ground, it will crush her. And it would be partly your fault, wouldn't it, for not stepping up?" The guilt settled in my stomach like a cold stone. My fault. It would be my fault if Chloe's latest half-baked scheme failed. Never mind the years of financial bleeding, the emotional exhaustion. My needs, my ambitions, my fragile foothold in the art world, none of it measured up against Chloe's fleeting whims, magnified by Mother's unwavering favoritism. I sighed, the sound heavy and defeated. How much does she need? The amount was staggering. Several $1,000s. More than I had ever given at once. It would wipe out my savings completely, leave me scrambling for the gallery show expenses. But the alternative, the weight of Mother's disapproval and the knowledge that I had failed Chloe, felt unbearable in that moment. I transferred the money. I told myself it was an investment in peace, in not having to hear Mother's disappointed sighs or Chloe's tearful accusations. But as I clicked confirm on the transfer, a profound sense of emptiness washed over me. It wasn't just the money. It was the feeling of once again sacrificing a piece of myself, my security, for someone else's poorly planned dream, while my own dreams were consistently pushed aside. The gallery show went ahead, but the piece wasn't framed as beautifully as I had hoped, because I'd had to cut corners. I attended the opening, standing awkwardly by my painting, feeling a quiet pride in the work itself, but the joy was muted by the lingering resentment and the gnawing anxiety about my finances. Mother and Chloe didn't come. Mother said she had a headache, and Chloe was busy scouting locations for her boutique. They sent a text message wishing me luck, which felt more like a perfunctory obligation than genuine support. Chloe's boutique lasted 6 months. It was a disaster. She spent more time posting on social media about being a girl boss than actually managing the business. She hired her friends who treated it like a party. Inventory was mismanaged, and she blew through the initial capital, my money, and more that Mother had provided on frivolous things rather than stock. When it inevitably folded, Chloe was, predictably, devastated. And guess who was expected to provide comfort and, implicitly, more financial help to dig her out of the hole? Me. "She's lost everything, Lena," Mother wailed over the phone. "She's heartbroken. She feels like a failure. You have to talk to her. Cheer her up." I remember sitting in my studio, the smell of oil paint thick in the air, looking at a canvas I felt stuck on. My own progress, my own struggles, felt invisible. Chloe's very public, self-inflicted failure demanded the spotlight, required my emotional energy, and, I suspected, would soon require more of my non-existent funds. Something shifted inside me in that moment. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a cold, quiet clarity, a realization that this cycle would never end. Chloe would always fail upwards, cushioned by Mother's intervention, and I would always be the one expected to prop them both up, financially and emotionally, while my own life and work were treated as disposable. The unseen labor they demanded wasn't just about money, it was about my time, my energy, my emotional well-being, all silently consumed by their needs. I thought about the years of loans never repaid, the hours spent listening to manufactured dramas, the times I had gone without so they could have. I thought about my 30th birthday towels, the gallery show they skipped, the constant dismissal of my art. It wasn't love, it wasn't family helping family. It was exploitation, pure and simple, wrapped in the language of obligation and guilt. I didn't respond to Mother's text immediately. I sat with the feeling, the cold clarity solidifying into a hard resolve. I looked around my studio, at the canvases leaning against the walls, some finished, some still works in progress. These were real. This life, built piece by piece, struggle by struggle, was real. More real than Chloe's fleeting fancies or Mother's carefully constructed narrative of martyrdom and favoritism. My phone rang again. It was Mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then Chloe called. I let that go too. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of their disappointment or their anger. I was just tired. Bone deep, soul tired of being the quiet, reliable, endlessly giving Lena. The next day, I started painting with a fierce new energy. The piece I had been stuck on began to flow. It was darker than my usual work, full of sharp edges and deep shadows, but with pockets of intense, defiant light. It felt like I was painting the truth I had been living, the unseen struggles, the slow draining of my spirit, but also the resilience that was finally hardening into something unbreakable. When Mother called again, her voice was tight with annoyance. "Lena, are you ignoring us? Chloe is devastated, and I am dealing with a lot right now. We need to talk." I took a deep breath. My hand trembled slightly, but my voice was steady. "Mom, I can't give Chloe any more money." Silence on the other end. A shocked, disbelieving silence. It was probably the first time I had ever said a direct no to a significant request involving Chloe's finances. "What? What do you mean you can't?" Her voice was sharp, dangerous. "She's your sister. She's struggling." "I'm struggling too, Mom," I said. the words feeling strange and powerful on my tongue. I've been struggling for years, trying to keep myself afloat, and every time I get a little ahead, I bail Chloe out. I can't do it anymore. I don't have it. Which was true. Don't have it? You live like a pauper. You don't have expenses like we do. This was her go-to argument. The idea that because I didn't live a lavish lifestyle like the one she enabled for Chloe, I somehow had an endless supply of disposable income. I don't have it because I gave it to Chloe last time, and the time before that, and the time before that, I retorted, a little heat entering my voice now. And I need to buy supplies and pay my rent and frame my paintings for shows that actually exist, not failed boutiques. The line went dead. She hung up on me. Chloe called immediately. Lena, Mom says you're being impossible. How can you do this to me? I thought you cared about me. Her voice escalated into familiar, performative hysterics. Chloe, I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite my racing heart. I care about you, but I can't keep sacrificing my own financial stability for yours. You need to figure things out for yourself. But I can't. It's too hard. You're the strong one. You always help me. Helping you by giving you money every time things get tough isn't actually helping you, Chloe, I said, repeating something my friend Maya had gently suggested to me months ago. It's enabling you. And it's hurting me. So you don't care? She wailed. You just don't care that I'm about to lose everything? I care, I said, feeling the familiar pull of guilt, but resisting it. But my caring doesn't mean I have to set myself on fire to keep you warm. You need to find your own fire, Chloe. She started crying harder, then devolved into accusations. I was selfish. I was heartless. I had changed. I thought I was better than her. I was ruining her life. It was a torrent of blame designed to make me back down, to make me fall back into my old pattern of apologizing and caving. But I didn't. I listened for a few more minutes, recognizing the well-worn script, feeling nothing but a weary detachment. I'm sorry you feel that way, Chloe, I finally said. But my answer isn't changing. I can't give you money. I have to look after myself now. Fine, she screamed, her voice cracking. Then don't. I don't need you. You're not even family. She hung up with a dramatic flourish, slamming the phone down in a way I could almost hear. The silence that followed was deafening. It felt like a rupture, a breaking point that had been years in the making. I expected to feel guilt, regret, perhaps even fear, and I did, a little. But mostly, I felt a profound sense of relief, a lightness I hadn't realized I was missing. The weight of their expectations, the burden of their reliance, had been heavier than I knew. The calls and texts continued for a while, shifting from anger and accusation to passive-aggressive guilt-tripping. Mother would send oblique messages about how stressed she was, how worried about Chloe, how some people just didn't understand what family meant. Chloe would post sad, dramatic memes on social media clearly aimed at me, or tag mutual acquaintances in posts about fair-weather friends and unsupportive sisters. I ignored them. I didn't block them, just muted notifications and archived the messages without reading them fully. I needed the space to breathe. I threw myself into my painting. With the money I had saved, by not giving it away, I finally bought better quality materials, invested in professional framing, and even allowed myself some small comforts, like groceries that weren't the absolute cheapest option. I focused on my work, on honing my skills, on telling my story through my art. The piece that had felt stuck became the cornerstone of a new series, raw and honest and full of the complex emotions I had finally allowed myself to feel. My friend Maya, who owned a small art consultancy, was incredibly supportive during this time. She had seen the toll my family took on me for years, offering quiet validation and encouragement. When I showed her the new series, she was visibly moved. Lena, she said softly, standing in my studio, looking at the finished pieces. These are incredible. There's so much power in them, so much truth. Her words were a balm. Someone saw it. Someone saw the truth I had painted, the pain and the strength. Maya believed in the series so much that she leveraged her connections and secured me a solo show at a prestigious gallery downtown. Not a small emerging artist show, but a main exhibition space. The theme was unseen. I knew immediately what it had to be about: the invisible labor, the quiet suffering, the hidden strength of those who are constantly overlooked. Preparing for the show was consuming in the best way. It required all my focus, all my energy. There was no room for family drama, no space for guilt. I was building something real, something entirely my own, something that couldn't be taken away or squandered. I didn't tell my mother or Chloe about the show until the invitations were printed and sent out. I knew they wouldn't understand, would probably dismiss it. But sending them an invitation felt like a necessary, albeit terrifying, step, a boundary made visible. Their reaction was predictable. Mother called, not to congratulate me, but with suspicion. "A solo show? Are you sure? This isn't one of those pop-up things, is it? Where is it?" When I told her the gallery name, there was a pause. The gallery was well known, highly regarded. Even she couldn't entirely dismiss it. "Oh," she said, the surprise evident in her voice. "Well, that's nice, dear. Is it profitable? I hope you're not spending too much on all this." Always the underlying financial judgment, even when faced with a significant professional achievement. Chloe sent a text. "Wow, a show, fancy. Hope you sell enough to finally pay me back, lol." The casual cruelty, even now. I didn't respond to either of them. The opening night of the show arrived, a blur of excitement and nerves. The gallery was beautiful, the lighting perfect. My paintings, the Unseen series, hung on the walls, vibrant and powerful, telling my story without me having to say a word. People arrived, dressed elegantly, circulating and looking at the art. My heart pounded. Maya was there, beaming, introducing me to collectors and critics. The energy in the room was electric. I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in my life, not just as Lena the quiet sister, but as Lena the artist. And then I saw them. Mother and Chloe stood just inside the entrance, looking slightly out of place amidst the gallery crowd. Mother was wearing an expensive, slightly ill-fitting dress, her expression a mixture of forced pleasantness and underlying disapproval. Chloe, in a dress that looked hastily chosen, was scanning the room, her eyes wide with a curiosity that bordered on shock. They hadn't expected this. They had probably expected a small, amateurish affair, something they could patronize for an hour, and then dismiss. Instead, they walked into a sophisticated event showcasing mature, compelling work by an artist they had consistently underestimated and exploited. I watched from across the room as a prominent local art critic stopped in front of one of my largest pieces, a painting titled "The Weight," an abstract depiction of a figure bent under geometric shapes, yet emanating a quiet light from within. He gestured, talking animatedly to the gallery owner. Mother and Chloe edged closer, trying to overhear. Their eyes scanned the price list displayed near the entrance. I saw Mother's hand go to her chest, her mouth slightly agape. The prices weren't astronomical for the art world, but they were substantial. Far more than any amount I had ever asked Chloe to repay or Mother had ever given me as a gift. They started walking slowly through the gallery, looking at the pieces. Their usual dismissive air was gone, replaced by a stunned silence. They stopped in front of Borrowed Light, a painting I had worked on during the darkest period of giving money to Chloe, abstract shapes representing fragmented pieces of myself given away, interspersed with slivers of luminous color breaking through. They knew, on some level, that this art was personal, that it came from a deep, hidden place. I saw Chloe lean into Mother, whispering something. Mother nodded, her gaze fixed on a painting titled "The Quilt of Quiet Labors," composed of interlocking abstract shapes representing the countless small tasks and sacrifices I had performed, rendered in muted, almost invisible colors, with vibrant threads of gold and crimson woven through. symbolizing the resilience and spirit that persisted underneath. They saw the names of collectors written on the little red dots next to several pieces. Sold. My show was successful. The quiet hobby they had scoffed at, the unstable income they had pitied, was generating real value, real recognition. Recognition they hadn't facilitated, hadn't controlled, and couldn't take credit for. My knees felt a little shaky, but I stood taller than I had in years. I wasn't the overlooked sister in the background anymore. I was the artist whose work commanded attention, whose story was being told on these walls. Maya came over, sensing my focus on the entrance. "They came," she murmured, a note of caution in her voice. "Yeah," I said, taking a deep breath. "They came." I decided I wouldn't hide. I wouldn't pretend I didn't see them. This was my space, my moment. I walked slowly across the gallery towards them, my heart beating like a drum against my ribs. People greeted me as I passed, offering congratulations. I smiled, nodded, feeling the warmth of genuine appreciation, a stark contrast to the cold dismissal I was used to. Mother and Chloe saw me approaching. Their eyes widened slightly. The stunned silence was replaced by a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. Maybe apprehension, maybe grudging acknowledgement, perhaps even envy. "Lena," Mother said, her voice tight, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, this is quite something." "Hello, Mom." "Chloe," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Thank you for coming." Chloe mumbled a greeting, still looking around, her gaze lingering on the sold stickers. "The gallery is very grand," Mother continued, clearly struggling to find footing in this new reality. "Are these all yours? How? How long did it take you to paint them?" "Years," I said, my gaze meeting hers directly. "Some pieces took months, others, years of learning how to see clearly enough to paint them." There was a pause. The subtext of my words hung in the air, the years of struggle, of being unseen, of finally seeing myself. "Well," Mother said, adjusting her scarf nervously, "it's certainly different from the kittens you used to paint." The old dismissal, the faint praise wrapped in judgment. It was automatic for her, but it didn't sting anymore. It just sounded small, pathetic, even. "These pieces are about truth, Mom," I said gently but firmly. "My truth." Chloe finally spoke, her voice a little breathless. "These are expensive. People are actually buying them?" It wasn't a question about my art. It was a question about the validation they had denied me, financial success. "Yes, Chloe," I said, a small, genuine smile touching my lips. "They are. It turns out my hobby is a viable career." Mother cleared her throat. "Well, darling, I'm glad to see you doing well, very glad. You know, we always supported your art." The lie hung between us, thick and heavy. They supported it as a cute pastime, as long as it didn't interfere with their needs or demands. They supported it right up until it started requiring my own resources, my own boundaries. I didn't challenge her lie. There was no point. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about living my truth, independently of their narrative. "Thank you, Mom," I said, the words neutral, devoid of the longing for approval they once held. A collector approached, wanting to discuss a piece. I turned my attention to him, stepping away from my mother and sister, stepping fully into my role as the artist, the professional. I felt their eyes on my back, felt the shift in the power dynamic that had governed our relationships for so long. I was no longer the quiet, easily dismissed Lena. I was the woman whose work filled this room, whose voice, expressed through paint, was finally being heard. They didn't stay long. They circulated awkwardly for a while longer, clearly uncomfortable, before making their excuses and leaving. As they walked away, I saw Chloe glance back at me, her expression unreadable, a mixture of awe and resentment. Mother kept her gaze fixed ahead, her posture rigid. Their jaws, figuratively and perhaps almost literally, had dropped. The quiet painter they had taken for granted, the sister they had bled dry, the daughter they had kept in the background, was suddenly, undeniably, in the spotlight. Leaving the gallery that night, long after the last guest had departed and the paintings stood silent witnesses to the evening's triumph, a profound sense of peace settled over me. It wasn't just about the success of the show, though that was validating beyond measure. It was about the internal shift, the reclaiming of myself. I had faced the people who had hurt me most, not with anger or accusation, but with quiet strength and the undeniable evidence of my own worth, defined by me, not by them. The relationship with my family changed irrevocably after that night. It became distant. They rarely called, and when they did, the conversations were strained, superficial. There were no more demands for money, no more casual jabs about my work. The dynamic had shifted, and they didn't seem to know how to interact with the new version of me. It was painful in its own way, a grieving for the family I had always wished I had, but also a relief. The constant drain, the emotional tightrope walk, was over. I continued to paint, to create, to explore the themes of visibility and vulnerability in my work. The success of the Unseen series led to more opportunities, more shows, more recognition. My life became richer, not just financially, but in meaningful connections with people who valued me for who I was, who saw my art and my spirit. I learned to set boundaries, not just with my family, but in all areas of my life. I learned that saying no wasn't selfish, it was necessary for self-preservation. I learned that my time, my energy, and my emotional health had value. I learned that I didn't need anyone's permission or validation to pursue my dreams or to define my worth. There were moments of doubt, of course. Ghosts of the past would sometimes whisper, reminding me of the years of feeling inadequate. But I had my paintings, tangible proof of my journey, my resilience. And I had my new life, built on a foundation of self-respect. I haven't spoken to Chloe or Mother properly in a few years now. We exchange brief, formal messages on holidays, but the deep connection, or the facsimile of it that we had, is gone. It's sad, yes. There's a lingering ache for the family I never truly had, but there's also freedom. The freedom to be authentically myself, without apology or explanation. The freedom to paint the world as I see it, and to be seen in return. The memory of their faces at the gallery, the shock, the disbelief, the silent acknowledgement of how wrong they had been, remains a powerful one. It wasn't about gloating. It was about the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had finally broken free, that I had built something beautiful and strong from the very things they had dismissed. My quiet labor was no longer unseen. My story was no longer just the background. And that, I realized, was the most valuable masterpiece of all. So, that's my story. It's been a journey, right? From being the quiet one who absorbed every jab and slight, to the woman who finally found her voice, not just in her art, but in her life. Living here in New Orleans, with the jazz music drifting up from the street and the smell of honeysuckle in the air, feels like finally being home, truly home, in myself. It wasn't easy. Walking away from family dynamics that are toxic, even when they're hurting you, is one of the hardest things you can do. There's so much programming, so much guilt tied up in it. But I learned that protecting your peace, honoring your own worth, isn't selfish. It's essential. If you're watching this, and you feel like you're living a version of that story, feeling unseen, undervalued, or drained by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, I want you to know you're not alone. Your quiet strength is valid. Your dreams are worth pursuing. And you don't need anyone else's permission to be you, to build your own life, to paint your own masterpiece. Don't be afraid to set boundaries. Don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to walk away from what's draining you. Even if it's family, it hurts, but staying hurts more. And on the other side of that pain, there's freedom. There's peace. There's the vibrant, powerful life you were meant to live. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. I hope it resonates. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story touched you, please give it a like. And if you want to hear more stories of finding strength and reclaiming yourself, consider subscribing. Remember, your story is still being written. Make sure you're holding the pen. You are seen, you are valued, and you are strong enough.